Hallelujah! It's the moment we've all been waiting for, and it doesn't disappoint. There's a lot to talk about and uncover in this Alien Earth trailer, so this probably will be just one video out of many, where I'll be discussing everything right down to the tiniest detail, so feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss anything. It also makes me happier if you do. Alright, here we go, in the pipe, 5x5. I tell you what, why don't we just take a moment here, because unless I'm mistaken, this is our very first glimpse of Earth within the Alien franchise, aside from the AVP films. It may not be something many Alien fans ever wanted to see, but what I like about it is that the city isn't some aesthetically glorified cliché of a future world. Thankfully, it is very much grounded in the design of our own city landscapes, which pairs quite nicely with the humble ship design of the Maginot. It isn't flashy like the Prometheus, nor is it as classically rigid as the Nostromo. It's a sensible fusion that supports the original idea of a used future, which more or less remained the theme in the first three films. Additionally, the visual effects are of a very high standard for TV, and strangely, not many of the creature effects have been overly promoted so far, unlike Romulus, where they would constantly release images and videos on the practical methods used in bringing the beast back to life. Neverland Research Island, and of course the year is 2120, 2 years prior to the events of the first Alien film. A couple of things occur to me as we behold this corporately owned and controlled beautiful vista. Firstly, this could suggest that any outbreaks of exotic fauna will be isolated and contained, especially if the crash site, Prodigy City, is located on the island or another nearby but remote place. After all, they do have to somehow explain why it is never mentioned in the films that the first recorded encounter with a xenomorph is now on Earth, not LV-426. This may have been information Ash was privy to, but it could not have been common knowledge. Secondly, the name Neverland is interesting because metaphorically it could be described as a state of perpetual youth, or a place where dreams come true. Think of Peter Pan, for instance, or well, maybe Michael Jackson's Ranch isn't the greatest example, but you get my meaning. It speaks to the pursuit of immortality, Prodigy's crucial goal of extending human life through the understanding of consciousness and cybernetics. Oh, what horrors have happened here in the name of progress, I wonder. This all feels deliciously sinister, doesn't it? Offering a chance for a terminally ill child to live out her life with a new body is noble on the surface, but this is Weyland-Yutani's competitor we're talking about. And these corporations aren't altruistic by nature, are they? I think this is a classic case of scientists genuinely caring for the patient's well-being, but the eccentric CEO has more insidious considerations. Also, notice that with these analog controls and terminals, etc., they are sticking with the retro aesthetic as much as possible. When they do go high-tech, I'm pleased to say it's not sterile or generic. It actually gives me the sense that this could be real technology. It feels quite believable. Well, here we are, Prodigy City, and in the distance we have Mount Doom, which is undoubtedly the headquarters of Prodigy itself. I find it fascinating that this corporation has its own city. Does that imply the same for the other dominant companies? Is there a Weyland-Yutani city as well? It's a very astute choice of direction from Noah Hawley that bolsters the mythology of corporate power and control, which has always been at the backbone of the Alien films. I can't imagine there's much crime in this city, but I also wonder if there's a sort of localized dictatorship that's just accepted if you agree to live and work here. So, the Maginot actually crashes into Prodigy's HQ, which is interesting. It makes me wonder what the retaliation will be towards Weyland-Yutani, because, as was explained in a recent interview with Hawley, he stated that the crash was intentional on Weyland's behalf. The reason for this was due to frustration over Prodigy's breakthrough developments in synthetics, particularly the ability to transfer a human consciousness. These advancements, of course, far outpacing Weyland's current status in the tech market.
We have a downed spacecraft!
Okay, as the tension starts to rise following the urgency to secure the ship and its cargo, I detect an understandable amount of naivete from our main protagonist, who is still a child.
We can do it. We're fast.
I would assume that these others are simply synthetics, and she is the only human consciousness placed into an android and a child's mind at that.
We can do it.
I love the reaction from Timothy Olyphant as she suggests that she and the rest of the Simps can lead the way on board this ominous exploration vessel and deal with any unknown threats. Or maybe he's sharing the same reaction I had when she armed herself with a samurai sword in 2120, while everybody else is carrying a pulse rifle. Where did she even get the sword? Strange. What could be very intriguing about this small tactical force made up of human soldiers and artificial persons is how the various hostile alien life forms will react to them. I say this because in the films, there were very few interactions between Xeno and Synth, leaving much to be desired. Perhaps Bishop's encounter with the intelligent Queen was the most notable, but it was widely understood that a facehugger and a fully grown Xeno would be able to sense them as non-organic, however. Outside of the films, xenomorphs have had a particularly complex relationship with androids, and in Alien Isolation they were entirely ignored by the creatures altogether. Therefore, I'm very curious to see how any interactions play out between them. That clicking sound right there is 100% a predator, and that is all the confirmation you need, folks. You heard it here first. But joking aside, between all the marketing for the 2 new Predator films and possibly Alien Earth, there seems to be so many subtle hints and nods towards a merging of the 2 franchises. A big part of me hopes that they will leave that well alone, particularly for this series, as it will tie directly into Alien, remember? I don't mind another AVP film for some side fun, but am I the only one who feels that Alien will lose some credibility if they make it official? Alien was always the more mature sibling franchise, even if I love most of the Predator films. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to take it seriously again if I see a Predator hunting Xenos in Alien Earth.
Collected 5 different life forms.
Now, does this mean that the ship only collected 5 different life forms overall? Or is he remarking on the 5 deadliest specimens on board? I ask because many are still housed in their containers, like this giant watermelon egg. I don't even want to know what's inside that. And we even see some movement from the containers to the side here. However, whatever is loose really did a number on this guy, and it's reassuring to know that they're going all in with the appropriate amount of gore that befits anything alien. I'd love to know what the deal is with these drawings. Surely the Maginot, a science and exploration vessel searching for dangerous life forms, would not have been a craft intended for families with children, I'd assume. I highly doubt they belong to Wendy, as she wasn't that young before her consciousness was transferred either. In any case, it's a nice touch and one that brings home the potential consequences if these things are not contained, and certainly adds a chilling vibe and atmosphere to the trailer. Whatever is happening here looks absolutely horrifying, and I'm thankful they decided to blur out the scene because I don't want this spoiled. I'm having a hard time stopping myself from thinking about what could be occurring here, as it looks thoroughly violent. Clearly the human soldiers are under attack by something or multiple creatures hidden within the tall grass. 2 things stand out though. In the centre we see an upward explosion of blood and body parts, most likely not from firearms or explosives, as the surrounding grass is not disturbed. This begs the question of what could devastate his body in such a fashion. To the right appears to be a creature eerily similar to the xenomorph, with its long dome and whip-like tail that can be seen rising above the grass. The main difference is that it is very pale, almost flesh-coloured. I would argue that there are at least 3 assailants in the shot, as every soldier can be seen physically hitting something beneath them, while most notably the synthetics in the foreground stand still to watch, unmolested by whatever is attacking the group. Here we go, now we're talking. They've sent in the big guns. A special ops team with pulse rifles that look more advanced than they did in 2179. And one individual wearing a powered exosuit, aiding in the use of what is most likely an early version of the smart gun. Most of all, I think it's a tasteful inclusion to add exosuits, as it enriches the experience of seeing a future military, hopefully with better leadership this time. Again though, I have to comment on the brilliant choice of locations to film in Thailand. From the creatures to the scenery itself, everything exudes an exotic appeal, which is quite a sharp contrast to the claustrophobic setting of space, but feels like a very welcome change so far. I'm not entirely sure if this is correct, but it appears that Prodigy has a Weyland-Yutani captive, judging by the sight of this man being restrained in some enclosure. My guess is that this is the synthetic we saw in the teaser trailer inside the mother room, the one who most likely adhered to the company's order to crash the ship into Prodigy City. So now they want answers, and I believe this human aspect of the story, the war between two powerhouse corporations, could become very engrossing to watch as the episodes roll on. After all, there needs to be something that provides intense dramatic value, that runs parallel to the existential threat of the perfect organism. I'm amazed by the cinematography and lighting so far. It's quite a detachment from the horrendously bland images that were released a couple of weeks back. But I have no qualms with what I see here at all. The corporate lifestyle looks relatively enticing, in fact. But now, the fun, albeit slightly disturbing part of the trailer. What are the specimens we should all be so worried about? And these are just the organisms of an invasive species that didn't escape the ship. Who knows what else is out there? The description of this creature alone is the stuff of nightmares, trust me. It says that its tentacles are designed to climb into and dislodge the eyes of other living organisms. It then takes over the ocular pathways to the brain, overriding the neurotransmissions to the rest of the body. Ouch. And what's this? In a scene that is very reminiscent of Burke's fascination in Aliens. It's easily one of the most iconic and recognisable things we fans know. Just left out and exposed. I wonder what happens next. It's very small in comparison to the other ovomorphs, but we don't yet know how this egg was formed. Did it morph from the harvesting of different organic matter, or was it laid? I can already imagine all the David theories floating around online. I suspect we are going to find out precisely what this tentacle creature is capable of when exposed to Fluffy the sheep over here, and boy, they didn't waste any time moving on to corporate sacrifice for the greater good, did they? Also, as I'm sure most of you are well aware, Ridley Scott is an executive producer for the show. Now the rumours are that his creative input is very minimal on the series. That being said, there was one clause in the contract. What you are witnessing here is the crossed thumbs and twitching fingers of the legendary filmmaker himself. He just can't keep his hands off the franchise, can he? Whatever all of these new predatory species turn out to be, I don't see any of them being a match for the xenomorph, however deadly and ferocious their traits may be. I do think they will be an excellent showcase for just how creepy and disturbing you can design an organism, as well as an interesting addition to the franchise. Much like our little friend here who, by the sounds of it, mimics and replaces the eyeball and then proceeds to take control of its host. Now that is a frightening parasite. At the very least, these other organisms will certainly rival the hostility and nightmarish nature of the central villain. There is also the possibility that some of these other pods are variations of the xenomorph that have adapted differently through other lifeform varieties and terrain. Personally, I have my doubts about this, as the crew of the Maginot has clearly followed a collection protocol based on a one-of-each-species approach to obtaining them. Part of me still cannot believe we're going to experience a fight for survival against these iconic aliens in such familiar settings, ranging from urban environments to the wilderness, with much of the special effects looking very practical, I must say. If I were to raise any concern, and it wasn't one I'd previously spent too much time thinking about, it would be regarding how physically capable Wendy and her fellow synthetics are. The idea of a synthetic evolving into something superhuman, rather than simply being enhanced with a few extra features, first emerged in the prequels when we saw that David and Walter were more or less as strong and tough as a power loader. The thing is, without any context to these quick and flashy shots, I do remain in the camp of it looks great and I'm very excited, but I hope we don't see too much of the beast becoming diminished by any of this Xeno versus Synth hand-to-hand combat, going in the favour of the synthetic. But otherwise, I'm fairly surprised by how much of the aliens they've decided to show in the series, and I'm impressed with how they're doing it. It is evident that, although the show may have some form of build-up to a big event, it would also start very explosively and won't hold back from the get-go. One of the things in the marketing campaign that concerned me was whether all the Maginot scenes were only constructed for the endless teasers, but not the show. Thankfully, it looks like we're going to see exactly what happened on the ship, and probably all within the first episode. Moreover, what I would like the show to do is expand on the lore, whilst rigidly adhering to the existing canon. For instance, the nerd in me desperately wants to know where the ship has been, all the juicy details on these specimens, and some decent insight into the origin of the main beast in this epic story. I believe it is more likely that Hawley has shielded his Alien Earth story from particular subjects of contention in the franchise to allow for a more coherent and immersive narrative, and that makes sense. but I do hope that there will be at least some hints or clues relating to the bigger questions in this saga, such as matters involving the space jockey and the natural or unnatural evolution of this short-lived but extraordinary organism. Then again, he might be thinking, well, the prequels tried to do this and got a little lost along the way, so I'm steering clear, thanks. The last notable shot to talk about is the individual that I believe they retrieved from the crashed vessel. I had assumed him to be a synthetic because of his lack of emotions in the teaser trailer when seated in the mother room while he was accepting orders to crash land into Prodigy City. The way he's profusely sweating now makes me question that. But what's happening here may be Prodigy's method of extracting information needed to determine why the crash occurred, among other things, regardless of whether he's human or artificial. Information that might also expand the audience's knowledge of new star systems or perhaps help us dive deeper into places already visited in the films. So, my verdict, I'm relieved, that's for sure, and at times very impressed with what they're showing us. As an Alien fan, whenever you first hear that they are adding new creatures or changing what was already perfect, it does create a feeling of animosity towards the people involved. But after what I've seen in this trailer, they've handled many of these elements gracefully, and the additional creatures feel like a welcoming addition rather than an annoyance that diminishes the threat and dread of the xenomorph. So, all that combined with the fact that Noah Hawley has done some excellent writing in the past, with Fargo being his most prominent, it's looking very good so far, and I'm actually starting to feel that excitement of being an Alien fan once again. I can't wait to read your thoughts in the comments, and I'm interested to see what stood out to you, or if there was anything important that I no doubt have missed. Until the next video, take care of yourselves. Dude signing off.